when Peter and I first moved back to Madison, we met Daniel Yopek, and he had bought 853 and inaugurated it by a series of parties where we met everyone that we would later on be friends with for the next 20 years, I guess. And out of that grew the whole gallery, which tried to be a democratic organization, and I think it succeeded partially. What Daniel's feeling was to take art out of the university and the elite moneyed class and bring it to the people, and allowing artists from the people who were not of the moneyed class or appealing to them to show their work and hopefully sell their work. So Peter and I got on board with that, and we were very interested. I, at the time, was trying to be a full-time weaver and had several exhibits at Gallery 853. I also became a member of the board, which was very small, just Daniel Yopek, Dennis Buchholz, and myself to begin with, I believe. We talked about what shows we wanted to have in. I can remember Laurie Gold, who had, I believe, had an MFA show, and a few other people who, interestingly enough, all were from the university getting their MFAs. So Tina Wolfer-Gully lived upstairs at the time. She was a fabulous painter, and I know that she had shows there. But we really were trying to make sure that people had an opportunity to show who wouldn't ordinarily have a show at the Arts Center, or the only other alternative would have been a commercial gallery, which would be only interested in people who could really sell their work. It was people who weren't necessarily really saleable. Another thing that we were trying to do was to bring all the artists together. Besides a social organization for fun, it wasn't a social organization to make sure that artists had a chance to know one another and be inspired by each other's work, but also to have a voice, artistic movement that as we perceived it. To that end, we did a bunch of different things. One of them, Peter and I applied for a grant later on called Get Your Name on the List. We wanted to do a big listing of all the artists in Madison, and so we got some money, very little for all the amount of work that went into it, I'm sure. Got a bunch of money to advertise and collect a big database. What were we using in those days for a database? A card file? I have no idea. Those files must be in existence somewhere for all the artists that were working. Must have been around 1975, I suppose. The other thing that we did was a big newsletter to keep people involved. And that was an amazing project, really, because we wrote articles and published this little newsletter, and it was by subscription. And I remember I had a part-time day job at the time, forcing my boss to buy some subscriptions for his friends, so rich doctors were supporting us in some ways, I guess. But it was a mimeographed newsletter. I think it may even have been those white copies that you turn on a drum. It was a terrible typist, but I know I did some typing on that. The neatest thing we did was to make each cover of every newsletter an individual run of a signed print. I remember I did a block print at the time and signed and numbered them. And then Bob Danner did one, I know. And we put them in plastic bags and bound them into the newsletter. It was an 8.5 by 11. And I sewed them, and I still have the original old Singer sewing machine that I sewed every issue. We would all get down there and have a big collating party. I'm sure there was a lot of beer drinking going on. We put the newsletter together, and then I would sew it. I don't remember very much money ever crossing hands. Passing through. I'm not sure. We had a lot of wonderful times together where we saw each other's work. I think that was the most important part of it, was to really feel a part of a group of artists. Later on, when I became only a member of a group of musicians, I look fondly back at those days.